Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Ronan Nazarene Talks. I'm Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films.
And I'm the other guy. I'm the idiot. I'm putting all pressure on Ronan to be the have all intelligent stuff at this time. I will just sit in the background and watch him explain films.
Well, today we're going to do another moving on. Today we're going to do another two Powell and Pressburger films. One of their earlier ones, allegedly one of the first ones that they actually called themselves the Archers. One of our aircraft is missing from 1942, and then A Matter of Life and Death, or as it was known in America, Stairway to Heaven from 1946.
Yeah, I always misname one of the aircraft is missing because I always thought one of the airplanes are missing, and then it's like I always get it wrong.
Yes, this is the first film, and its natural sequel was one of our dinosaurs that's missing.
Yes.
Both of which had Peter Ustinov in them. So.
Yeah, it's
the unofficial sequel was one of our dinosaurs missing.
Yeah. It's part of a duo, though. There's 49 Parallel as well.
Yes, which was made the year earlier.
Which was when it was Germans in Canada trying to escape, or Germans in America trying to escape to Canada. Or were they in Canada?
Germans in Canada trying to escape, I think.
Yeah. That's what I thought. For some reason, I started to doubt myself as I started talking. I was like, I'm getting this wrong. I'm getting this embarrassing.
Yeah, sometimes
wrong.
Two of those films kind of merge together, because I could have sworn Anton Walbrook was in this one, but he's in 49 Parallel.
Yeah, 49 Parallel was the one I've seen more. It's a more famous one because you've got the scene with Olivier and his dodgy accent.
Yes, which is quite incredible.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the one I remember, and between both of these, it's one I've seen a lot more times. It's like it is the more of a crowd pleaser than this one. But this is the underrated other one, really.
Yeah, this is the one that's less seen, but it might actually be better and tighter.
Yeah, it's we did talk about doing both of them, and I thought they're too similar to really do because it's too much, it's too kind of close together. So we stuck to two movies with pilots, two films with pilots.
Yes, they both start in similar fashions, but go slightly different directions.
Yep. But I really enjoyed this one. I was really impressed because I've only seen it once before. It's one of those ones I guess I could. Is it in the box set, the 10-film box set?
I think so.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that, but I think
I know, but I have seen it, but it's been a long time, and it was like one of those ones. I actually managed to pick it up in the streaming for HD.
Yeah, because I managed to find it in Blu-ray on Olive. On Blu-ray.
Show off.
It doesn't have any
you show off your copy of it, why don't you?
Yes, I'll show off the copy. The print's not great. There is some grain, but I think there's other scenes that look really good. So
yeah, the streaming version looks really nice, even though it's not physical, but it does look. You're getting a good quality, and it does take place in Holland. Basically, it's but these pilots who are doing a bombing run, and then on their way back, they get hit, and the plane goes down, and they have to make their way through Holland to get to the ocean to get picked up.
Yeah,
and it's just about their adventures, but it actually becomes all about the resistance. That becomes almost the subject of the film. It's you watching them go through different resistance parties to get to the coast, and it shows you how difficult it is to be a resistance person in any occupied country.
Yeah, because both these films are kind of soft propaganda films, certainly the second one, but it's how to do propaganda films without being really didactic and really... It's how to do propaganda films properly, basically.
Yeah, because it just shows them as human beings trying to survive against oppressive force. That's it. That's the kind of tack they take. And it's like the propaganda should be implied by who they're fighting. That's all it really does. It just becomes a case of how do they fight against oppressors.
Yeah, it's all about
still an odyssey through different people's approaches to it as they try and
garnering support and saying we're all in it together. So
yeah, it pretty much is a version of the Odyssey, but with fighter pilots rather than Odysseus.
Yes.
So it's basically another soft sequel was Ulysses 31.
Yes.
The animated show, which Ronan has kind of covered already because he's
Yeah.
researched so well.
Indeed.
He does stuff before we even planned this one.
Yes. I'm always laying the ground rules. So great path.
Yeah. So, and he's also doing Dungeons and Dragons as well. You should see Dungeons and Dragons thing. It's good. It's a good video. But it's something you'll never watch.
Darker very quickly. Yeah. It gets darker very quickly.
All right. But yeah, so as them going through the resistance, and so you get to know the characters, but they're all kind of stock versions of different English people, basically. So English people in this area, you get 6 different almost class system, and the lower classes, the higher classes, the experienced guy, the captain. So you get a sense of working classes and the more aristocratic classes all in this plane, and you're seeing them going through a different culture and experiencing our culture and how they react to it during wartime.
Yeah, it starts off with 6 of them. 5 of them are in the group, and they find the 6th one later. How they're introduced is wonderful in the cockpit, as they essentially introduce themselves and their job, just as a kind of roll call. But it's a brilliant way of actually introducing the characters to the audience. There's lots of lovely little technical flourishes. You know, this isn't Powell and Pressburger at their most kind of technically jaw-dropping, but it's still, there's lovely little tricks that they use.
Yeah, because they're taking a genre, basically, the fighter pilot movie, and seeing what they can do with it. It's like taking a genre and seeing what they can do. And they've always been like Howard Hawksy in the sense of taking a genre and then filling it in with weird characters and letting them take over, really. Yeah. But they're doing it in their sort of Archer's way of doing it.
Yeah.
The hilarious thing is the guy that's missing, they just say, he's a bit thick, more or less. And it's like, he's probably caught. Like,
and again, where they find him is just so surprising and so funny.
You know, it's like, you couldn't make it. One of those things is like, you couldn't make it up, but they made it up, and it's a really bizarre moment. It's like, wow, how do you get away with this? This is, most films, you would not get away with this scene.
Yeah.
But because of the tone of the film, and because it shows you throughout it how, like, crazy the world is if you're living under occupation, how things can come together. It's like, it feels natural.
Yeah.
Because they fluke into meeting the resistance by running into these kids who know the resistance people, because they're all like the kids of the resistance, basically, and they just take them there and goes, hey, we found the pilots.
Yeah.
Which is charming. It's really charming how they do it, because it's like, they could have done a kind of the normal stock thing of them running into local people and having a face-off or something, but instead of running into kids, and it just makes them far better, because you have to get to learn their characters as they talk to kids.
Yeah, there's lots of little subversive things throughout the film that, again, like you say, kind of subvert the stock.
Yeah, because you see them, they're not running for Grand straight away. They're just trying to hide. They're not trying to shoot everybody. They're just saying, okay, we have to get out of here and we'll have to try and use our wits. And the first thing they do is run into kids, and they use our wits to realise that these are at least be helpful to them.
Yeah.
You know. And then we meet the resistance. They get very obvious questions for them that are make you realise how scary it is to be the resistance and how easy it is to get caught. So they bring that up really quickly, is how they have to be very, very careful.
Yeah, because when the resistance are actually asking them things, it's stuff that the airmen don't even get or don't even understand why they would ask that. You know, like, you know, you could have found uniforms, and of course they wouldn't. That would be ridiculous. And of course, the airmen aren't thinking on the same level as people who are just trying to survive day to day.
Yeah, I know, because they're not trained for like spycraft, and the resistance is all focused on spycraft. It's a totally different world. But as soon as they work out why they're asking, it's fine. It's like, okay, we accept that. It's not our world. We accept you know what you're doing, and we'll just go along. And they're kind of like, moved from place to place after that. They're pretty much And one of an actor who really gets too far into it.
And any excuse, as actors do, straight into drag.
Like, I know.
You have all these, outfits we could change. I'll go straight into drag. It's quite wonderful. we should say, just from a technical standpoint, David Lean, who you might have heard of, he edited the film, and Ronald Neame was actually the DP who went on to direct Design Adventure.
Yeah, I know.
Hopscotch.
This was their...
The technical levels quite awesome.
Yeah. I mean, basically, this was a bunch of people who were all... I was surprised to see their names on it as well.
Yeah.
They were all basically starting their careers at the same time, and like Michael Powell was probably slightly ahead of them, but not much.
Yeah.
But it was a high craft film, and you could see everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody were pretty clued in. The actors all knew what they were doing. Everybody knew. It was just that's a kind of enjoyment of just the craftsmanship, because it's not self-indulgent the way that some of the later Lean films is.
Yeah, because the scenes in a sewer later on in the film, and they're just beautifully shot.
Yeah. And they're just a lot of really well done stuff. But it's not like... But then again, you can tell that it's showing a lower budget than some of the stuff that we're going to do later, because they had to make it work on a lower budget, but it really works for what they're doing. They really make it feel like you're in a foreign country, even though they probably shot it in Wales or something. I don't know where they shot it, but... It looks like they shot it outside the normal way you shoot stuff, but they made it look as if it was in Holland, even though it obviously wasn't.
Yeah, because the thing is, this is like second tier Archers, or even if you're being super critical, like third tier Archers, but it's still so wonderfully done and wonderfully crafted. And there's a lot of filmmakers, when you get to their second tier stuff or their third tier stuff, it's like really wobbly, but this is still a really finely crafted film. And
most directors, we get to the first tier stuff, it's kind of wobbly.
I mean, obviously we are talking about the cream of the crop here, but
I mean, it is just wonderfully done. There is a lot of just the detail in it all was just amazing. Just the sense of them just traveling through this countryside, and it's so well paced and so like you get to the point. There's always a lot of charming thing that gets you through the next point, so you always feel as if it's one of those films that pauses enough to give you the information but doesn't pause too long.
It's episodic, but it doesn't feel episodic because the joining pieces are still, they're not just there to move on to the next thing. They're still like worthwhile. The scene in the church is wonderful as well, and again beautifully shot, and with a very young Peter Ustinov as a priest.
Yeah, because I mean the funny thing is they're almost the guest stars in their own movie. They're the pilots. Like whenever you get to a new place, they sit back and let the other actors have their scene, and then they come back in and they sort of do their thing. But it's almost like they've been directed really well. He's like, okay, just relax, and let the other actors do the thing to this scene, and you come in at the end and you'll do your bit. It's like that. It's really well done that way. I'd
completely forgotten Robert Helpman was in it, and of course Robert Helpman turns up to Robert Helpman things and go again, those amazing eyes.
I know, and plus he turns up and he's like the villain.
Yeah,
I don't know. It was quite amazing to see him, and it was like, wow.
Because again, it's a beautiful setup of he's kind of not friends with Nazis, but an ally with the Nazis, and he promised to get music, and of course he uses this little boy to get the music, and of course the little boy gets like the Dutch national anthem to play, so you just hear from the German barracks while they're listening to it.
Yeah, it's like it's completely messed them about.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful.
And how they mess about with the Germans giving them orders, where the Germans try to be petty, tell some of them to leave, so they all leave, and the Germans won't accept that, and it's like, the Germans are sticklers, so you just find ways to mess with them.
But it's also a wonderful way of saying, resistance doesn't have to be like blowing up bridges and stuff like that. Resistance can still be little things like not giving them the records they want, or pissing them off when they give you orders and things. Yeah,
and just little petty things, and realizing there's a speech later on saying basically they're trying to make themselves look like the conquerors of the earth, but if you actually just find ways to make them just look petty and silly and make them feel that way, that's the kind of one of the big things. It's the best way to win against them.
Yeah, that can still break them down piece by piece.
Yeah, slowly but surely, day by day, that gets to them.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we haven't even talked, you talked about the sewers, but the final section is amazing, where basically they go to meet this woman who's actually, who the Germans think is a traitor on their side. It turns out she's just playing them. They think her husband's dead and he's not dead. And she's just letting them think that they've won, and she's actually sneaking out all the pilots and stuff who come in through this area. She's the one who's actually getting them out. It's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of really strong female roles in it, Googie Withers and Pamela Brown.
I know. I mean, the women are pretty much in charge a lot of the time of the resistance. They're the ones who are really running it and telling them what to do.
Yeah, because at one point, I think it's Googie Withers that pretty much says, you know, who's in charge here? And then eventually the kind of more senior officer says, you are, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, but it is really enjoyable watching the characterizations. I mean, you've Emeric Portman as the kind of working class guy who's
from Halifax.
Yeah, and he's got his working class ways, and he kind of puts his foot in a couple of times and realizes he doesn't know his place.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's also a nice little wrinkle where, you know, they have to go to the church and it's like it's a Catholic or a chapel, and it's like a Catholic. And of course, the two of them are like, we're Presbyterians or whatever it is.
It's like you have a bit of
or
sacrifices.
Baptists or something. It's like, well, you have to kind of. I mean, there is a lot of humour in it as well.
Yeah, but it's never overplayed.
It's
though.
Natural, yeah, it's natural humour.
If people just saying things they would say rather than saying, this is a joke, you have to laugh at this joke. It's like, no, laugh at it if you like. If you don't like it, don't laugh. It's not a big deal. We've got a plot here anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's humour out of like cultural differences or things like that. It's nothing.
Yeah, and the point is, none of that matters because you're fighting against the Nazis and who's they're much worse. Yeah. And he's like, those are your enemies. Like these little petty differences don't matter ultimately against these kind of scumbags. I mean, the thing about Pressburger is he's one of the best writers of damning Nazis you're ever going to get. He really can damn them just by being really subtle about it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just... But
again, what works well, he can critique Britishness as well. That's why their pairing is just so sweet.
Yeah, I know. Plus, Powell can critique Britishness too. He understands it. He gets it. Like he's a very British guy, but he always understands the flaws of it. So he could direct that stuff quite easily.
Michael Powell has a wonderful cameo as the guy who's kind of sending out the bomber pilots. So he has a very posh accent to start with. He gives a moving performance at the start of the film.
Yeah, he sends out people to die, basically, just like any director would.
Yes.
You go do this.
It's full of little surprises like that, and obviously surprises in who actually worked in the film.
Yeah. It just is a really good film. It's one you can recommend to anybody and say you're going to have a good time with this. It's only an hour 40. It gives you a good idea of resistance. It gives you a good idea of what was happening during the war. And it's still very entertaining.
Yeah, and it's paced superbly. It doesn't drag anywhere. It just, once it starts, once they're up in the tree, talking to the kids, it just rattles.
Yeah, but even the setup's good. The setup's really good because you actually get over because I think we both watched the projectors, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically, you're actually the footage going over. The bomber footage is all great because you actually feels like natural bomber footage and natural bomber situation. It's just the tension of doing that. Because a lot of time you see bomber films, it just makes it feel like it's an easy job. This one, it's hard because it's like you have to keep control of the plane and aim it just perfectly and then let the bombers go off. And it's very difficult, and they stress how boring it is, then how difficult it is, and how tense it is flying over enemy territory all the time.
Yeah, there's a real authenticity to it, and you do get a feeling that it is a cramped space. You know, they are in tight spaces. It does remind me of the bombing scenes in Doctor Strangelove a bit as well.
Yeah, because they're just people within this environment, and it's kind of alien what the environment is. It just feels like it's not natural for people to be there.
Yeah, and the characters. There you go.
And they just make it that way. They make it feel just alien to them. It's like they're not used to this. This is only not long after flight was really invented. And these people were having to learn on the job for war to under a difficult situation.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
The fact that the kind of the senior member, you know, is maybe a little bit larger, so he finds it a little bit more cramped than all the other ones, which is a nice little point.
Yeah.
But it's
And we'll have
because
to sorry.
I was just going to say, it's because the character stuff is done so well. It's not dwelled on at the start, but there's enough. So you do feel there is a camaraderie between them, and you do care about them and are engaged with them to survive. Whereas if there was just no character stuff done and they were just dropped in, you wouldn't really care as much.
Yeah, but plus there's a really good clip to it because you always know where you're going. You have to get to this place by this time, and that's enough.
Yeah.
The ticking bomb thing's enough that you have to dwell on it, but you always know it's there. You have to get here. You have to get you basically out of a sight and close to where you're going to get escape. Then you wait, and it's always this sense of momentum to it. There's always a sense of direction, and they can mention where they're going, and then they can stop and have their 10-minute sequence of them trying to go through that area, and you get all the character actor stuff. But there's always a sense of direction to it. It's like hour 40 is a really good running time for something like this if you're someone talented.
But again, like we said, these are next level guys, and there's so many films like this that just don't know how to do it properly.
I know. It's I mean, and plus, I think we've both seen a lot of really long World War II movies that don't do it half as good as this, even though we've probably seen them 15 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because as the later years, the World War II films get more and more bloated, and the running times get longer and longer.
Yeah, no, because this is made during it, and they're trying to just make films as entertainments for people rather than epic films they spend a fortune on. Yeah, it's
that were post-war. Obviously.
Yeah, and also we should mention how they find their Powell on a football field. That's just insane.
Yes, but again, it has that. They're just the same as us. They love football as much as British people do. You have that universality as well.
Yeah, plus you find out he has his own little path we never saw.
Yeah,
he just fluked into surviving too.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole other movie with him that we don't see that it could have been a different movie. But they're smart enough to know you don't need to see that stuff. You need to
again, like you say, lesser people would have maybe had a whole other 20 minutes or 15 minutes with him and his story and intercut them, whereas there's no need to.
I know. Instead, they spent their time actually on the people to meet rather than
So when we do meet the sixth member, it is such a surprise, and it's just so wonderful.
It's so funny how he explains it all as if it's like, of course it happened this way, because he's clueless. He's the one who's everyone knows he's probably the least intelligent of the bunch, but it's just like, it's so charming.
Whereas if you'd intercut that and maybe joined them in a truck going to the football match, it just would have undercut the whole thing.
Yeah, because you have this sense of where's it going. Even though you know where they're going, you don't know what they're going to run into next.
Plus, you have it in your mind that perhaps he's dead. So they're either going to find him dead or we're just never going to find him.
Yeah, and also there's a sense in this film because you don't exactly know where you know what the aim is, and you know all these incidents. It always keeps you on edge because you don't really know how everything's going to turn out. And the Germans aren't oppressively always there. The Germans are always in the background and they're always floating, but they could bust in at any second, like in the church.
Yeah.
And suddenly you know, okay, they have so much power, they don't need to always be in the film, but you just need it every so often so you know that this is a threat.
But then they know how to ramp up the tension. The scene at the bridge is like so wonderfully crafted and so wonderfully done to ramp up tension.
Yeah. Plus the bit at the end, the capture the German boy, and the two Germans are in there. So what do we do with them? I would just drag it thing, and they seem happy enough to be taken prisoner of war. You can get the impression those two guys and the boy were not Nazis. They were just drafted, and it's like, oh, fine, just take us prisoner. That's fine. We're okay with that. Good.
Yeah.
They don't care at all. It's hilarious.
Because again, that's another thing Powell and Pressburger did was also to suggest that some of the Nazis were just like guys.
They weren't like
they weren't all mustachio twirling villains.
If you're in a boy stuck there, it's always a sign that people didn't really want you around. They didn't really trust you that much. It's like that's probably where a lot of the people who were not the ardent Nazis probably sent to.
Yeah,
you're not going to send them to somewhere important.
Yeah, and there's a nice little bit where they hear a boat approaching, but they're not actually sure which side it's on.
Yeah, just lots of little touches.
Yeah.
And it's almost throwaway tension because you can actually get tense, and the filmmakers know you can actually get tense, so they don't have to add anything to it. It's just like the tension of the situation's enough, which is what's wonderful with the film. It just knows what would make you stressed, and you don't have to egg it on anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise considering who made it, but obviously most people have seen a lot of World War II films, but it's amazing how vibrant and how interesting this one is.
Yep. It's just wonderful.
For what is a fairly kind of standard storyline that we've kind of seen 28 times before.
Yeah. And we'll see it so many times again. But I was thinking, compare this to Saving Private Ryan, which is another episodic World War II movie. Yeah. And I remember these characters so much better than I do those characters. I was like, where you get one or two and the rest just types you never get to know that well.
Yeah.
Really. You can tell the difference just in writing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Saving Private Ryan's well directed, he's just not well written.
Yeah, I can't really remember that much about it, to be honest.
Yeah,
because it's really...
But that's an example of just something characters are ciphers and they have all these speeches, but you don't really get to know them because they feel just like types who say types rather than types who you get to know a lot more as you go on.
Yeah, because when people talk about Saving Private Ryan, they talk about the opening, and it's like, yeah, that's like 20 minutes out of a 2 3/4 hour film, and it's like,
yeah, the opening somehow,
the opening somehow justifies its place, and it's like, well, you need more than just an opening.
I know. Yeah, because I mean, this one's sort of similar to something like the Big Red one for me, where it's like you get to know the characters, you follow the characters through a war, and you understand who they are through that war situation. It's like it's something more intriguing about it than...
Yeah, with war films, you kind of have to do that because you have to have people can identify with and root for. Otherwise, it just becomes this cold, distant thing where you don't really care and you're just there to see people die.
Yeah,
which, obviously, lots of people like war films for that, for the guns and explosions. But for me,
you like
it has
the
to be more
characters
than
there
that.
too.
Yeah,
and some of them don't do, some do. Just depends. And some of them do just enough to keep you interested. I mean, there's a lot of like epic World War II movies from the 1670s that they are kind of, a lot of kids are really cliched, but they have some decent actors who fill it out, even though it's not the most well-written film. You still get enough just by the way the actors do their job.
Yeah.
But this one's really well written. I mean, everyone's playing a part that's been specifically written.
Yeah, and it's so tight, like we said.
So it's a joy. This is a minor Powell Pressburger film. It's still a complete joy.
Yeah, it probably is a film that people haven't really seen that often or seen that much because it's not really on the television or anything like that as much.
Yeah. So I would say highly recommend this one. This is a really good, strong film.
Yeah.
And so who explained this one? So who gets this playing Matter of Life and Death?
Yeah, Matter of Life and Death is exactly the same, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
So it starts off with David Niven, who was coming back after a 6-year hiatus from films because he was actually in the war. And again, that's something that gives these films just post-war more authenticity than perhaps war films nowadays, because a lot of the people involved were actually in the war and actually fought in the war, so that gives a kind of authenticity to them.
Not John Wayne.
Not John Wayne, of course.
James Stewart did it.
Yeah, James Stewart did it.
A lot of people did it, but not John Wayne. Apparently, John Ford always gave him hell for that because he went and John Wayne didn't.
He shouldn't have worked with him as a protest.
Yeah.
I would probably watch more John Ford films, but never mind. So all his crew has been killed, and he has to bail out. He's talking to June, who's an American, over the radio, and he jumps out. He wakes up on the beach. He's supposed to be dead, but he's not dead. He thinks he's dead, and it turns out Heaven's made a mistake. Conductor 71, played by Marius Goring, who's absolutely wonderful, was supposed to pick him up, but because of the fog, the damned English weather, he missed him. And it just starts a wonderful tale of bureaucracy and red tape.
Or does it, or is it all in his
Or
head?
does it? Exactly. Yes.
Because it could all be in his head, and he could be just fantasizing, and he could have a brain tumor.
Yeah, it's one of the great early films about mental health.
Yeah, so it is wonderful because everything he sees is something you'd imagine a heaven's being. It could be all an imagination of someone who's well read, because he's portrayed as someone who's very well read. He's a poet. He understands a lot of the cultural stuff. So everything he's thinking of, you can imagine could be rules that are in his head, but also could be happening.
Yeah.
So you never quite know, really. And that's what's wonderful about it, because it takes both realities as being important. And
Yes.
it doesn't shortchange either one.
No. Plus the kind of psychology is pretty much up to date and accurate as well, because Pressburger was impressed by a book that was out at the time by a Hungarian about psychology and that kind of stuff. So that's accurate at the time and authentic at the time. So it's not just people making up stuff about the brain, which again gives it authenticity.
Plus, you're another excellent Roger Lively performance as a doctor, and he's amazing, and it's very different from Colonel Blimp, so it's real range. Plus, he gets to walk around without having a big belly for most of the film, which probably was a lot bit easier for him.
Yes, and again, wonderful turns by Michael Powell's dogs as well.
Yeah, but you also make Kim Hunter as the woman he talks to, and she's terrific. And you may know her as one of the apes, Planet of the Apes from the 60s, but this is her when she was young.
Yes, it was less ape-like.
Yes. And this is a delight, even though it's not one of my favourite Powell Pressburger films. There's tons of them I'd rate above this one. But every time you watch it, it's always like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's probably like my 6th favourite Archer's film, and it's still like, you could easily say it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd still rate the two we did before above it. I mean, Colonel Blunt's my favourite, but this is still top class. It's always one I think I always mentally underrate a little bit, because you always think everything. Then you watch a game, you realize how intelligent it actually is and how smart it is about everything. And
yeah, because it's more about Britain and America post-war and attitudes to each other. Somebody pointed out the fact that she's from Boston, the fact that Raymond Massey, who prosecutes the case,
and he's hilarious.
He's from Boston, obviously was part of the rejection of the British. So it's about kind of Britain and America as much as it is about, you know, reality and fantasy, heaven and earth, you know, love. Yeah. The fact that heaven's in black and white is a genius move rather than the other way around.
And the argument Roger Lively is basically making is, despite our differences, we're all kind of the same. These are just surface area. And it's quite interesting because you actually see how ahead of time they are, because you have like Indian soldiers and things, and it's not commented at all. I mean, this film nowadays, it would have lots of close-ups of them and lots of comments. There, it's just like, that's part of the world. Just
that scene in heaven, well, it's like multiracial and it's not an issue. It's just like everybody's the same.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you say, nowadays it would be hammered home.
Yeah, equality. And it's like, this one just assumes equality. It doesn't assume. It just assumes everyone's the same. That's it. I mean, it's kind of weird because David Niven's not an actor I tend to like that much, but he's really good in this film. A lot of time I find him a bit colder, and because he tends to play a lot of like English guys, and he's always a lot of time it's second fiddle, or he's kind of distant. And this one, he's much more alive, and he's much more. He's given a lot more to work with, really, to be a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
But he's also quirky in the way Powell Pressburger films are. The characters are quirky, and they don't. They say what they think, and they don't care if you don't like them for that. And it's like, which I think was very much like Powell Pressburger themselves.
Yeah, and again, 1946 and what they did with Technicolor is just ridiculous. I mean, I knew Jack Cardiff shot it, but I didn't realise it was actually Jack Cardiff's first film as a DP. I mean, it's a pretty amazing first film as a DP. Oh yeah, all we need to do is have you do colour to black and white and transitions and stuff like that, but it's your first job, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and make sure those lips always look really red.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Powell likes the colour red. You get that, and it is very primary. The colours do feel very primary. They really take it into technicolor thing of boosting the colours. And that's what's good about the reconstructions now and restorations, is that all those colours can get put up to where they should have been always. Yeah. And it just looks absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, the first transition from colour to black and white, or vice versa, is just like, it's still jaw-dropping, and it's like 80 years later almost, it's still amazing.
Yeah, it's also amazing as every character in the film could have their own movie. You could follow them. Yeah. Some of the minor characters you'd happily follow for the whole movie. I mean, there's a character who dies in the first 2 minutes. He's a bomber pilot or whatever. And he hangs around waiting for David Niven because he knows, well, he couldn't make it either. So he's been around heaven for Niven, and he doesn't show up. And you follow him starting to fall for one of the women who are the processing everything.
Yeah. Kathleen Byron.
Yeah, I know, and it's like
would appear in another one quite soon.
Yeah, and it's really amazing. And it's like their little thing is brilliant throughout the film. It's just little details, and it's almost like a slight romance that never even commented on. It's just the actors doing their thing and been told to do the thing, and it's all just floating in the background, like life goes on.
Little Powell and Pressburger touches, like when the Americans come in, there's Coca-Cola machines for them when they get to heaven.
I know.
It's just little touches like that. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, when Roberta Lively dies and they go into heaven, he's just walking, talk to some other guy from some other culture, and just as if it's normal. It's like,
yeah, and the fact that when Roger Leslie dies, like nobody mourns him. It's like a good thing. It's like he's dead and go to heaven. Yes, he can help. David Niven, nobody's that upset about it. It's wonderful.
But it's also because of the way the character was. It was almost like he always like they knew that he'd be a bit disappointed if you mourned him. It's like it's not his thing. It's like, why waste your time?
The fact that he died by driving into an ambulance, which
I know.
What he was just against for David Niven's just wonderful.
I think he's such a hellraiser, that character. he's almost mocking death throughout the film. It's almost like a pity if he didn't die at some point because he's insane. He didn't even put in his bike. He's insane.
Yeah, because it's the scenes on his bike again remind me of the Lawrence Arabia scenes in the bike before he dies. It's just the same kind of shot as well. It's almost as if David Lean worked with Michael Powell or something.
I know, amazing. And but I mean that character, the character's great. The scenes in his house where he's looking around the village and watching people.
Yeah,
and he's actually doing his job that way by seeing how people's ailments are as they walk around, saying, that doesn't look good. You probably have to talk to him here. It's like,
which again reflects those big circles in heaven, where they're looking down.
Yeah, I mean, him dying, going to heaven is barely a change for him. He's just like, oh, that's a place I'll go and do stuff with. He's just so curious about everything. He's not fazed at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those films that you wish you could go back and see how an audience reacted to it, as far as the Technicolor stuff, the amazing matte work. It's just because it's still like jaw-dropping now. But
there's an amazing voiceover at the beginning going through the stars, just talking about the stars and how they form.
It's like, what kind of film is this? It's just like,
and it's funny because it's a film that's all about fantasy and heaven. So you start with something about science.
Yeah,
and it has science and fantasy mixed in all the time. So they're just two different areas, and they're accepting of everything. It's just like, there's this, there's this. It's all very interesting, isn't it?
It's just another example of how they were just doing something completely different from everybody else in 1946. It's like post-war. Oh yeah, we'll just do this.
And it's almost like, as well as the romance is so good, and it's almost like, of course it is. They don't have to work at it too much either. They don't have to work at it, but it's just perfect. They fall in love when he thinks he's dying, and that's just an accepted fact for the rest of the film. And it works really beautiful when it's like one of the great romances, even though there's not lots of smooching, lots of romantic dialogue or anything. It's just like very simple, very kind of common sense people who are falling in love, and that's it, which makes it even more powerful.
Yeah. And again, on a technical level, when they pause time, it's just absolutely wonderful, especially during the table tennis.
Tear on
and the tear from the rose. Yeah.
It's amazing.
So it's simple stuff, but when it's actually mounted this way, it still gives you a sense of wonder, which is what cinema is at its best.
Yeah, it's also the great scenes where basically Raven Massey and Lively are arguing each other are astonishing, because every time Raven Massey has a big speech, Lively just always counters him with something really simple.
Yeah, the one the dueling wirelesses when he puts on a cricket commentary.
Yeah.
And of course everybody's like, oh my god, and Trubshaw's like really excited because it's cricket. And then of course you think Roger Lively can't come back with anything with that. And of course he gets a wireless produced and it's like bebop music or dancehall music from America, and it's just like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it's like no one's gonna get that either. Just that's them, that's their culture. And it's like, and even the Americans don't like that. And then when they say when Massey's always on about the British being awful, and then Lively says, okay, well, let's have an American jury.
Yeah.
And just having a whole range of Americans, and just shows, yeah, they could see the decency of the love story, and they didn't need they didn't have any kind of baggage. They just saw, oh, this makes sense, and it was just like, it's really decent to the average American. And we same way for the film, you see decency to the average Brit. Just for decent people, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those films that shouldn't really work, but of course it does, because you're dealing with people who are top of the game.
Yeah, no, almost everything in it shouldn't work. I mean, it's just a wall-to-wall scenes of things that should not work, and they always just pull it off.
Especially when it was made, it's like, but that's the genius.
Yeah, I mean, just after the war, and they're having a whole movie where you've got people coming from heaven, and you remember Goring as a guy who was killed during the French Revolution.
Yes, he lost his head.
I know.
He keeps making the thing about, oh yes, I lost my head.
Yeah.
I got out of control, I lost my head. He's always like pulling at his neck. It's like,
I know. You should see my scar.
Yeah, it's just, he's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and it's like this. You have a very European character in the middle of all this, a very British or American thing. It's just wonderful because it adds another dimension that you'd really feel it missing if it wasn't there, but you wouldn't know what you're missing.
Yeah. And Richard Attenborough turns up for 2 minutes, but it's amongst his best work. It's this little wide-eyed, naive kind of kid who's obviously been killed and is in heaven. It's just a beautiful moment.
And all of these numbers of many people have been planned to die, and it's like, and the people in heaven don't really. It's just like it's a job for them. It's just trying to process all these people because these idiots have gone to war. It's not like they take great delight in anything. It's just like, we're trying our best and we're trying to be decent about it, and that's it. That's all we can do. It actually shows you the horrors of war without actually showing the horrors of war.
Yeah.
All these numbers.
Just the sheer scale.
And it's like, and there's a whole bit in the fog, them trying to get back through the fog. And it's like, God, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
But they don't overdo it. You just get a sense of the difficulty of war, which is what Powell and Pressburger are really good at, is how difficult it is to actually go to war for anybody.
Yeah.
Because they don't overstate it with tons and tons of action. They take the action out of the war scenes, mainly. Because, I mean, if you look at both films we've talked about today, both of them, in other hands, would have a lot more action in them.
Yeah.
They barely have any.
No. It's the results of it.
Yeah. It's almost like they're not really interested in the action. It's like, that's boring stuff. Yeah. Anyone can do that. We're doing the harder stuff. We're doing the kind of character bits. It's more difficult.
You can think of Colonel Blimp with the duel scene.
You don't see it.
Exactly. It's just like Crane, whereas other directors would have shown that in its entirety.
Yeah, and they were much more interested in the build-up to it.
Yeah, and the ritual of it.
Yeah, and this one, it's not about the death; it's like the after effects of the loss, and how people deal with it, and a sense of how does someone who think they should have died but they didn't, and how crazy it feels to them, and so it could even be not even a matter of life and death. It could all just be like surviving something you shouldn't have survived, and what it does to your head. Because that metaphor works as well throughout the film.
It's literally about afterlife and afterlife.
Yeah, and it's just like that sense of it could be him just trying to work himself back into life after a near tragedy.
Yeah.
You know, and it would work that way too. So it works on so many levels, and it's just wonderful, and it's so simple. So all that stuff in an hour and a half, hour 40.
Yeah. It's almost as if they knew what they're doing.
Yeah.
But again, there must have been people at the time just going, how is this going to work? What's going on? It's just like, just trust it, it'll be fine.
Again, it's one of those films where you look at it and think, how did people think Hitchcock's the best British director? Like, how is this possible?
Or David Lean.
It's like this stuff's so much more difficult than what they were doing. You know, it's like this is such a higher level and so much more difficult. It actually requires actors who know what they're doing, requires technicians who know what they're doing, and it's very technical and very simple and complicated at the same time.
Yeah, because obviously, you know, Powell was demanding, but when you see the results, it's like, well, of course.
Yeah. And even people stopping in frozen time like 50 years before the Matrix did it.
Yeah.
And he did it very simply and it was fine. It was like
but even when Conductor 71 picks up the books that have been, you know, knocked over, we know how they did it and it's a simple thing, but it's still wonderful.
Yeah, it's a very magical experience.
Yeah, it's just a film that's, well, magic was a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not even close to being like our favourite film by them.
I know, it's not even my top five.
Such an achievement. It's
yeah. It's quite astonishing how good they were. How it's the same with how we've done it with Bergman films. Is we talked about how great all these Bergman films were, and it was like it's not even our favourite one. It's not even close to our favourite one.
Yeah.
So I mean, these great directors, they're just great. They just have something about them that's just.
Yeah, there's a reason they're next level guys, pretty much.
Yeah. And even when a next level director does something you find disappointing, sometimes it's like it's still so complicated compared to most directors that it's acceptable, it's fine. It's just like doesn't really do it for me.
Yeah, or most directors wouldn't even try it. They wouldn't even attempt it.
Yeah. Or if they did, it would be so embarrassing. How many films you see about heaven that are just embarrassing? That's just like, oh, that's cringy. That's so cringy. And most of them, basically, because they talk about religion and afterlife and things in such a redundant way that it just feels like you've been talked to an idiot. And that's why I assumed you're intelligent.
Because that's the thing, God isn't really mentioned.
I know, he's not.
It's a heaven, which again is just trying to work to actually do its job.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually just trying to function. There's no kind of, oh yeah, we all just sit back and sit in clouds and have fun. You know, it's like they've still got a job to do.
Yeah, a lot of people come through there now process the afterlife, and that's their job.
Yeah.
It was quite hilarious how the one film that actually seems to adore this film and bring stuff from it is Bill and Ted, the second Bill and Ted movie. It's the one film that actually does quote it and is like, you know, yeah, we love this one.
Yes.
As well as Bergman, it's like that film actually quoted a lot of really good films.
Yeah.
With respect.
I suppose Here Comes Mr. Jordan's got a little bit of that. It doesn't really bring up God too much. The original one with Claude Rains, it's a bit more functional again.
Yeah, it's just the afterlife is the afterlife, and that's it. Yeah. And let's not.
There's no dogma attached to it.
Yeah, but it's quite hard to do because everyone always feels that you should be almost promoting your religion.
Yeah,
is the best one, is the only one, and it's like, nah, don't do that. You just going to embarrass yourself.
And like we said, I think it will surprise people that there is like that multiracial stuff in heaven for that time. It's like,
yeah, and it's not a big deal at all. Yeah. I mean, remember 1917 came out a year or two ago. They're talking about some people were talking about there was some Pakistan soldiers and that, and some people objected to it or something. I haven't seen it. Yeah, they were just saying it was like a bit weird showing it in. And this film did it like just after the war, and it was no big deal. Yeah. That's just life. And it's like, yeah, just get on with it. That's just life. Who cares?
But again, I think if you take Powell and Pressburger as a whole, they were ahead of their time. I think that's one of the things that maybe they weren't appreciated at the time, but because they were ahead of their time, their stuff still endures.
Yeah, they weren't
And does it
appreciated for
seem-
much stuff. They were just always viewed as too vulgar for British taste. They
Yeah.
weren't good, classy boys or anything. They were
They're probably
too
too
much imagination.
continental. Yeah, probably too continental.
Yeah,
With
their
their loaded
ambitions.
colours and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they liked everybody rather than just us. What's the matter with them?
Yeah.
How do you like Americans? Look at them.
Yeah.
That's
Or
kind of
the
that's the funny
French or
thing is
whatever. Yeah.
what's that?
Or the French.
I know.
Whatever.
Liking the French, that's even worse.
I know. Yeah.
For post-war Britain.
But as much as we like films like from 30s and 40s and 50s, a lot of them have dated in a certain aspect. You know, and to some extent, some of the dialogue from Powell and Pressburger films have aged, but they hold up surprisingly well, like 18 years later.
You understand the context of them, though. You understand that's a social context. I think in things we only see the really good films from that period. All the really bad stuff's gone. Yeah. Well, we've got that advantage. We don't get to see the really real dreck, you know. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I've found some of them.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a video in there for you somewhere.
Yeah. I don't need to go back to the 40s to find awful films. I can find it from a few years ago quite easily.
Yeah, but Powell and Pressburger just stand out.
Yeah, I believe it or not, my nephew started recommending bad films to watch from a channel.
Excellent.
He's only 12, and he's like, "You watch this for your channel? It's terrible. What's that?"
That's a good resource.
Jesus, thanks a lot. You have such respect for me.
That's having contacts.
Yeah. So yeah, no, so Powell Pressburger are still amazing. They're wonderful. She goes to the films. It's the type of things you don't want to have it descend into this scene's great, but they're all great. The scenes are all great. There's so many bits we haven't even mentioned yet.
Yeah, there's so wonderful, so many moments and so many little lines that are just absolutely wonderful and have greater context.
Yeah. The wings and the plastic that fold up and to be put on as they go through and you heaven. It's just great.
Yeah.
I mean,
and about how, you know, when he lands on the beach and he thinks he's in heaven and there's little signs that maybe he is, you know, the little naked shepherd boy.
Yeah.
Kind of thinks.
You
and then
do that
he sees the dog and he's like, "Oh, I'm so glad. I always thought there would be dogs, you know, in heaven." It's like, it's just nice little touches like that.
Yeah, it's quite funny because they did a film called Soul last year, and it's pretty much a love letter to this film.
Right.
You've seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, that's not a shock. Yeah. But there's so much from this film and that film, and it's obviously they've seen this film a lot. Yeah. They obviously adore this film. It made Soul. It's so I mean, it's like they used to have an influence because I think everyone does an afterlife film. This is the film they're probably thinking about.
Yeah,
because it's the best one. It's the one that everyone can still remember as being a really great film, The Afterlife in Heaven. It's one that everybody still follows.
Yeah.
And again, it's still not even in our top 5. That's quite astonishing.
I know we've talked about 2 films that probably wouldn't be in our top half dozen Archers films, and they're still better than 99% of everything else.
Yeah, no. So I think we've given it a good shot here. I don't think there's much more to say, really, beyond go see the films. Beyond us just starting to rant about how great they are again.
And just to say, you know, their run from like say 1941 to 49 is just like incredible.
Yeah.
It's
and even afterwards,
cinematic runs. Yeah.
Even the lesser films afterwards are still really good. I mean, it's just that thing is even directors when they've gone beyond their peak. If they're good directors, you're still going to find little gems within stuff even after they've done their best work.
Yeah.
You know.
Tales of Hoffman came after that period, which is still like amazing.
Yeah. We'll get to that.
No doubt, yes.
Yeah, well, it is one of my favourites, so we'll definitely get into that one. I need an excuse to watch it.
It's the only one I've actually seen in the big screen.
Wow. I haven't seen that on the big screen, but one day.
Yeah, saw it at the GFT when it was restored.
Show off.
Yep, it's the only one I've seen. Way back in 1951, I saw it.
Right. So that's us for now. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
And go watch these films is the main
Thanks.
thing. You won't regret it.
No.
So bye for now.
Cheerio.